So today's topic is foreclosures and REO properties. So when you hear somebody say REO, they are talking typically about corporate owned and or bank owned properties. Especially in the world of real estate agents, we're talking about properties that are on the market usually as listings. And REO is kind of like the all-encompassing term that we use to talk about these properties. These property listings can be owned by a corporation, they can be owned by a bank, they can be owned by a hedge fund. They're not necessarily foreclosures, although a lot of people will call them foreclosures. Sometimes they are actually a foreclosure that is foreclosed on and repossessed essentially by the bank or the mortgagee or the mortgagor, and that entity now owns the property, and on their balance sheet they have a section called real estate owned, and that's where it lists the properties that they own, where they've repossessed those properties. And typically that real estate owned section, those are properties that they want to turn over relatively quickly and get sold and get off their balance sheet. So that real estate owned line item is where the term REO comes from, real estate owned. That's what that means. So like we said, it's not necessarily always a bank though. So sometimes you have where a bank has foreclosed on, let's say, a dozen properties in one area, and they ended up taking those as a package and selling them to like a hedge fund or something like that, some sort of investor or wholesale investor, where they bought this small package of properties, and then that investor would take them out to an REO agent and ask them to sell those properties for them as well. So it's not always a bank-owned property that you're dealing with. So we're going to talk about those today. And right now, real quick, I am going to, Miranda, we got Miles is recording, so we'll get the recording to you, and then I'm recording as well. And I'm going to actually probably edit it and compact the training, and then I'll send it to you also. But anyway, let's talk briefly about who am I and why do I have any right to tell you anything about foreclosed and REO properties. And then we're going to dive into a little bit of Miles's background so you can learn a little bit about him and what his experience is with foreclosures and real estate owned properties as well. So as some of you know, I've been in real estate since 2008. I got my real estate license it was about February 2008 when I actually started in real estate, and the stock market had crashed. That was when the real estate bubble burst. And, I started and everybody was peachy keen in the office that I started in. And then the next week it looked like somebody that everybody knew had died. The office was a wreck. Deals were falling through left and right, and it was just chaos. So shortly thereafter, I learned that the only people that were actually closing deals on a consistent basis as far as buyers go were investors and cash buyers. And I ended up focusing primarily on working with investors and cash buyers in 2009, 10, and 11, because those guys and girls were making it to the closing table. They were making it to the closing table fast, and there was not a whole lot of fall throughs or cold feet happening between the offer going in and us making it to the closing table. So I started working with cash buyers, and when I started working with cash buyers, I started working with a lot of investors, and those investors wanted great deals, and the best deals on the market back then were foreclosures and REO properties. So I ended up representing a lot of buyers on the buyer side, investors on the buyer side, where I would be placing an offer on a foreclosed property for an investor or even multiple investors on the same property. And I got very familiar with the process of placing an offer on a foreclosure or REO property and actually winning the bid and getting it to the closing table. So I got very familiar with the HUD home store was Equator back then. I don't know if anybody remembers working with Equator, but it was called something totally different. And the other various auction sites, you know, and we'll show you that a little bit today. So anyway, I've sold probably, I would say, at least 100 REO type properties between 2009 and today as a buyer's agent. So that's my experience with it on the buyer's side. And Miles will tell you a little bit about his background and what he's doing with REOs and foreclosures at the moment. Go ahead, Miles.
Thanks, Dustin. So yes, I got my real estate license in 2017. I'm in my 4th year as an agent. You know, initially got my license because I had been doing some investing and knew that I wanted to be in the business, and I knew and felt like it was going to add value to what I was doing as an investor. It's thankfully turned into a full career move for me. In my 2nd year, I started to explore foreclosure listings, how to get them. I was really intrigued. Again, a lot of it came from, you know, wanting to kind of be on the forefront.
Yeah, but
that,
my camera's on, so you're good.
You know, in hopes to build my business around it. So I was lucky enough to get signed up with, you know, the asset manager who lists for HUD and a few others. And since then, you know, I've do a combination of listings, initial inspections, and broker price opinions for HUD, who lists with RE Global, and then, you know, a few other asset managers, Keystone and AltaSource. You know, last year I sold about 20 listings, you know, with HUD specifically, and I've done, you know, quite a few dozen of the inspections and BPOs from the other companies. And, you know, right now I have about 7, and it's actually starting to pick up. And part of what I'll show you a little bit later, you know, kind of why I think that.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, Miles brings up a very good point there at the end. He's seen quite a few brand new listing requests here in the last month, and that is a good indication of what we possibly have to come here in the near future. So that kind of leads us right into, you know, why is it important for you to be at this class and to be learning about foreclosure properties? Well, there's some pretty good indications in the market right now that we're going to see a lot of foreclosures in the near future. And I think that anybody who tells you otherwise is just trying to hide from the truth, right? So we've had an eviction moratorium for almost a year now. We've had a foreclosure moratorium for almost a year now. We've had a lot of people that put their mortgages into forbearance back when the COVID stay-at-home orders were in effect. And those people, when you put your home in forbearance, a lot of times that forbearance, the way it works is once the 3 months is up, now you don't own 1 month's worth of rent, you owe 4 months worth of rent, because you got the month now is due, plus you got 3 months of forbearance that you didn't pay. So those people who look to put off their mortgage payments are now going to end up in a situation where they are unable to meet the demands of the mortgage, and therefore may end up in foreclosure soon. And I can tell you the most recent stat was something like was it 70 million people who are behind on their mortgage right now? 70 million. That's a lot. Okay. And I like, what's the adult population in the United States? It's like 330 million or something like that, right? So 70 million is a big chunk of it, okay? So just be aware of that. At some point, this is all going to catch up to us, and we're going to end up seeing probably another bubble burst situation in the United States, where all of a sudden there is a lot of REO properties hitting the market. And when the market is flooded with properties that are priced below market value, as REO properties typically are, what does it do to the market rate properties that are on the market? Right? Like, their price is going to go down too, because now they're competing with foreclosures that these banks and corporations want to drop. Okay, so now your market rate property prices are dropping and more inventory is hitting the market. So when inventory goes up, prices go down, the demand goes down. You know, if the buyer demand doesn't stay there, then you're going to end up in a buyer's market and you're going to end up with competing prices and prices dropping. Does that make sense? So that's why you would want to learn about REOs and foreclosures at the moment. And I know the market that we've had in the last several years has not been real strong for REOs and foreclosures. There has not been a whole lot of them. So it's hard to get experience with these things right now. It's hard to find them. And when you find them, it's hard to buy them because there's competing offers. Miles, how many competing offers did you have on foreclosures in the last couple weeks?
Oh, I mean, the inundated. I mean, the offers go directly to the asset manager, so I don't have visibility to them all. But I mean, based on the feedback we've gotten from the showings, you know, I know that there's been, you know, quite a
lot of agents asking and submitting offers and saying they're submitting offers. So there's been a lot of action on them. So when will we see these REOs and foreclosures become more prominent in our market? Miles, what do you think, Miles?
Well, I can tell you, just and I'll show when I share my screen later when I'm going over the website. I'll show you just looking at. I mean, based on, you know, like I said, we've gotten 3 new assignments last week in 1 week, which is the first time that's happened in some time. You know, we're heading into, you know, like I said, I sold 20 last year, right? And we have 7 right now, and it's only January. And I was just kind of looking over the sheriff's sale list just in Allegheny County, you know, for the coming month. And, you know, we're back to seeing mortgage foreclosures on there. Now, you know, whenever I'm demonstrating later, I'll kind of point that out. But that hasn't been, there was the majority of last year, that list was all tax sales because of the mortgage, the moratorium. So,
yeah. So it's looking like we're on the verge of a flood. And depending now that could change, right? Like if there's another moratorium on foreclosures or whatever, that could change. So it's all depending on the politics of the time. However, like I said, at some point it's going to catch up to us. So if it doesn't happen this year, there's a really good chance it's going to happen in 2022. And I really feel like we're going to see a large influx of foreclosures and short sales hitting the market this year for sure. So be prepared, be ready for that. Let's go in. So real quick, before I move on to the next section, any questions right now? If you got a question, you're going to have to unmute yourself and ask it, or you can type it into the chat box. Okay, so we're going to go, we're going to take a quick look. I'm going to screen share and I'm going to show you the MLS and we're going to do a search. And I'm going to show you guys a couple things that you can do on the MLS if you're looking for REOs and or how to identify them and that sort of stuff. So we're going to take a look at that right now. All right, can everyone see the MLS? Yeah, all right. So we just logged into the MLS. Now this is our MLS. If you're joining us from another location or another state, your MLS probably looks different than this, but that's okay because they all operate under the same sort of concept, right? So we're gonna go in here and we're gonna do a quick residential search. And Miles, give me an area. What's one neighborhood that you've got a REO listing?
North for sales.
Okay. So we're going to look at, I'm going to look at contingent under contract also. And I'm going to look at active and we're going to look in North for sales. And I'm glad you picked that neighborhood because I believe Bob Montcavage has a couple over there also right now. So we're going to search North for sale. So what I'm doing with this search is I'm searching for active, contingent, and under contract properties. They're all in North for sales. I'm not doing any sort of bedroom specifications or anything like that. And I'm just going to do a quick search. Now, if I'm representing a buyer and my buyer wants a good deal on an investment property and they want to buy a property for pennies on the dollar, this is how I'm going to do the search for this buyer. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to search the neighborhood. I'm going to search active properties, sometimes contingent under contract. And then I would typically go in and sort the list price from low to high. So we got the list price down here starting at $39,900. The high sale price or list price is $350. I actually already have this set up to sort low to high now because that's how I do it usually, because I look for good deals and I'm always looking for the cheaper properties, right? And then I'm going to go in, I'm going to actually click on the list number and I'm going to look at the properties to determine which ones are foreclosures and which ones are not foreclosures, or which ones are REO and which ones are not REO. So I'm going to click on this one and we're going to go in here. This is a $39,000 property. That's what a $39,000 property looks like, right? That looks good. Looks like it's in the price range that we're expecting. Nice chunk of land there. Beat up, boarded up, mold growing. All right, that's what an REO looks like. I would assume this is an REO or something similar to that. And there we go. The owner is Angle Fund. That is Angle, not Angel, right? Mm-hmm. So Angle Fund Incorporated. This is similar to a foreclosure or REO. This is a corporate-owned property. So it is not directly from the bank. It's one of those ones where more than likely they bought it in sheriff sale or they bought it from the bank at a discount and now they're reselling it to make a quick profit. So it's a corporate owned property. And we're actually, this is not like, I would not call this a legitimate REO. We're going to move up one. So we've got this Sprague. I'm going to look at the owner. The owner, this does not look like a corporate owned property either. So I'm going to keep moving. And once I find one, I'm going to tell you. All right, here we go. This is Myle's listing right here. So this property is on the cheaper end. It's listed for $51,000. Okay. And how I know that it's an REO property is the owner's HUD. Okay. When HUD owns the property, it's a foreclosure. It's been repossessed by HUD and it's being sold directly from HUD to the open market. So I'm going to look for that owner, and that's going to tell me if it's a REO property. Other owners that you might see there, you might see like Deutsche Bank or Standard Bank or First Commonwealth Bank or whatever, a bank's name in there. You might see it could just say corporate. If it says corporate, that's usually an REO property also. Any of those funds, so if you see a hedge fund or a corporation's name, an LLC or something like that, that's an indication that it could be an REO also. One of the other things that you're going to see, so see the agent remarks here. The property is listed on HUDhomestore.com and managed by Olympus. Here's the case number. Please visit the website to submit offers, blah, blah, blah. Usually you're going to have with REO properties, you're going to have the instructions for placing an offer are going to be in the agent remarks. So that's another indication that this is a foreclosure or a HUD property. And that's kind of as simple as that. So the easiest way to find these properties, if you're looking for a good deal, or if you have a buyer that's specifically looking for foreclosures or REO properties, is to search a neighborhood, whatever neighborhood or neighborhoods that person's interested in, and then sort by the price and just go in there and start looking at who the owner is. What's the owner name on there? And when you start finding HUD or corporate or an LLC, and you've got instructions to submit an offer like this, that's a good indication that it's one of those properties. Now, let me look at my notes here real quick. What do they look like, how to search for them, and how to know if it's REO. So I think we've determined that. Questions on that? While I'm on the MLS, anybody have questions, comments, concerns? You can unmute and ask me, or you can type it in the chat box. So let me look real quick at our questions here that we had from previously and see if we should hit anything up while we're here.
Oh, we just got one in from Mike. Can you negotiate the price?
Well, that's a good one. Miles is the seller's agent, so let's ask Miles. What do you think, Miles?
So, and let me just preface by saying a lot of my, my answers are going to come from, HUD's process specifically, yeah, especially smaller to mid-level banks. They have, they actually have reps and even just departments that in their own standards as far as how they accept and field offers. For HUD, they accept bids somewhat on similar to an auction style, but it's not a live auction. They basically establish a time frame where they're going to field bids on properties, and you really just there isn't any negotiation. You put your best foot forward, and if for some reason you come in lower than they're wanting to and you're the only bid, they will make a counter offer, and kind of in a sense expose to you what their bottom dollar is. You haven't been seeing much of that lately because offers have been going at or over asking, in the first bid period, just because of the demand right now.
Okay, so yeah, good question. Now, I'll also say that depends on the market. Okay, so Miles is licensed in 2017. He has not seen a buyer's market yet. Okay, back in 2009, 10, and 11, I was picking up REO properties for half price, sometimes less than that. Okay, and I was purchasing them for helping my clients purchase those properties for a huge discount. So and I actually, one of my clients from back then, he bought a property in Mount Washington for something like $13,700. It was listed for, I think, 50 or 60,000, and that was our offer, and they accepted it. 13,000. Okay, and that was back, I think that was in 2010. And the funny thing, and when he wanted to submit the offer, that back then I'm representing my buyer and I know the market. He said, what do you think we should put in for the offer? And I said, hell, let's go like 10 grand or something. And he's like, that's ridiculous. You're going to insult them. And I said, I'm going to insult a bank. Who the hell cares? So we submitted the offer. And we ended up picking it up for $13,000. That property we just sold last week for $112,000. Okay, Gabe brought the buyer. Thank you, Gabe. So that shows you, what you can get in a buyer's market and how things differ. It's a very different market in a buyer's market. As an investor, I would love for us to be in a buyer's market again soon, because I want to be able to pick up half price deals from REO corporations and banks. So yes, the price is negotiable sometimes right now. In the future, when we are in a buyer's market, the price will always be negotiable. So I hope that answers your question. Miles, I'm going to give you host, and then if you want to show, because I think you're going to be able to answer a lot of the initial questions that we had as you show how to submit an offer and how the HUD home store works. So I'm going to give you host here, and then you can lead. All right, you got the stage.
All right, how's that look? Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. All right, so I am already logged in here, so I'm going to be able to move through this. If I am going too fast, or if anybody has any questions as I move along, don't hesitate to interrupt me. So this is the home screen for HUD. All of the places that I list and or work with buyers are in Pennsylvania. So I found the quickest way to do a search is to just click the state, and it's going to show you everything in Pennsylvania. And then I usually just do Allegheny County.
And this is a good way, like if you want to see what's out there that's not on the MLS, because not all of these are active on the MLS. You
Sure,
can
no.
come in here and search this. And same thing with like auction.com and Hubzu. Those are two foreclosure and REO sites that you can go to, and you can find properties that are on those sites that are not on the MLS. So you can find deals that are not technically on the market on those websites by searching like this also.
Sure. Yeah, I've actually bought off of auction.com on 2 occasions personally, and I think one was on the MLS, but the other one was not. All right, so I'm searching Allegheny County, just an attestation to how things are moving. Yesterday there was 5 active listings on here. Now today there have been bids accepted on 4 of them. So things are definitely moving, as I'm sure you all know, even just generally on the open market. So all of the HUD listings have a case number assigned. That's another way to search if you wanted to, backtrack and just search for one particular property. Maybe you saw it on the MLS, you can input. But all communication that you're going to get or see from RE Global on there is going to have this case number included. So it looks like this particular property has made it through the exclusive period and is in what's called the extended period. So a little bit about that. Initially, all of their properties get listed in what they consider an exclusive period. Only make it available to owner occupants, government agencies, and nonprofits. Now, personally, I have not worked with or known of any government agency or nonprofit to buy. It's usually just owner occupants, and that period usually lasts anywhere from 3 to 14 days. And my observation is it's based on the list price. The lower the list price, usually it's a quicker, 3 to 7 day period. Some of the ones that do get listed, usually over 75,000, that goes to 7 days or more to give more time to market and show and hopefully get the best offer that they can. That information is going to be shown once here, and that looks like the next time they're going to be looking at bids is tomorrow at midnight, right? So one day, 12 hours. The other place you'll see that is here. You'll see when it's listed, what period it's in, and then the overall period deadline, which now that it's in the extended period, this just says that their listing contract with whoever has this listed ends May 23rd. Usually when we get a listing assignment and we do put it on the market, they give us a 90-day listing contract, which I don't know that I've ever had one expire. They either extend it or they've all sold in that time frame. So once it goes into the extended period, I think it's every 2 to 3 days they'll look at bids again.
Okay, now if you're an investor, Miles, and you want to submit an offer and it's the listing is like 3 days old, will you be able to submit an offer as an investor?
No. And whenever I'm going through like how to submit a bid, I'll show you why that is and how you'll see that if you're working with a client who is an investor and you get to that point. You'll catch where it asks you that question. What kind of buyer are you? And it'll actually have it grayed out, so you can't even. The only option you'll have in an exclusive period is to list it, to submit it as an owner occupant bid.
Okay. And how does the bank know if you're an owner occupant or not?
It's in the contract. When you get the sales agreement, there's verbiage in there where you're committing to a 12-month to occupy it as your primary residence for a 12-month period.
Okay. Have you ever had anybody that lied or got caught in a lie in the middle of a deal?
Not that I have not had anybody who has got caught, and I've never submitted personally or known about anybody who has lied, at least not to me. I mean, I've worked with a few buyers as dual agents on these, and to mine, nobody that I know about. And I get that question all the time. Well, how would they know? What would happen if they know? I mean, I actually don't know that answer. I'd be speculating.
All right, so I know that answer, and I'll share it with you.
Sure.
I had a buyer that wanted to buy a foreclosure back in probably it was like 2011, 2012, and he wanted to submit an offer during the owner-occupant period. And I said, well, that's fine if you're going to owner-occupy the property. And he said, well, I am going to owner-occupy the property. And I said, okay, great. So we submitted the offer, and what actually happened was, he filled out, he said he's going to occupy the property. He's got to move in, within 30 days, 60 days, whatever, after closing. He's got to live there for at least 12 months, blah, blah, blah. He filled all that stuff out. And then the bank, the seller, ended up sending us a message after accepting his bid about a week later and said, this guy already owns property. We're rejecting and nullifying the offer or the contract. So they just backed out of the deal totally. And then they wouldn't sell him the house after that. He was shot. He wasn't able to buy the property. So because he got caught in a lie, he shot himself in the foot and wasn't able to buy the property. And the fact of the matter is the property did end up going into the extended period. So if he would have just waited and told the truth, he would have been able to buy it when it hit the extended period. So make sure, if you're representing a buyer, make sure that they understand that these banks will look and do a deed search, and they will look to see if you own another property. And if you do, you will get shot down. And you could face criminal charges for fraud if you lie when you submit an offer like that. So that's my cover your butt warning. Now, me as the agent, I did my job. I asked him. He filled out all the stuff. I knew that he didn't own a property. He didn't own one that he lived in. I knew he was renting. So as far as I knew, he was an owner-occupant. So that comes back to bite the buyer, not the agent, as long as the agent, didn't do anything wrong. Now, if you are knowingly lying, you can get in trouble as an agent also.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. Well, thanks for sharing that.
Yep. Sorry to interrupt, but
no, not a problem. All beneficial information. So not to be too redundant or obvious, but this is the property information. It'll have the basic bedroom count, room count, square footage. A lot of this information, they're based on tax record information. A lot of times, like what we do. The amenities tab, if there are, they'll show things like parking, if there's a garage, things like that, what type of basement. This is where you'll find, your most beneficial information. This is where they post their disclosure stuff. We get asked about that a lot. Now we attach them as supplements to our listings, so you'll see them already. But here's an example. This is that same property. So this is the stuff that, basically in one of the questions that was asked earlier, I'll touch a little bit on that as far as the process pre-listing and what our expectations are. So the first thing that they do or ask us to do is to go and do an initial property inspection. Now, prior to that, they send an inspector out to do a full, as best that they can, inspection before they turn off the utilities and winterize it. So these property condition reports are prepared by an inspector, and that this all happens before we get there. So this is like what they base their disclosures off of, is really all they know is, this inspector's report once they take ownership. So there's two different kinds, and I can send examples of these to anyone who might be interested, or you can also go and pull them. And then this one's a little more abbreviated. And this is kind of specifically the repairs that they believe will need to be done to the property to make it, before it'll be habitable. And then maps will just show, kind of where it is, similar to what you'll be able to find on the MLS. And then the agent info is who has it listed. The field service manager is who goes out and does, cuts the grass, maintains the property. If there's a work order that needs to happen, the field service manager is who goes out to do that. And then the asset manager is who looks at the offers and manages the contracts, etc.
Now, let's say I'm an investor and I'm not a real estate agent, I'm not a broker, and I want to put an offer in on one of these properties. Can I just go in here and put an offer in?
I don't believe you can. And I get that question a lot, and that'll kind of segue to what I'm going to do next, and one of the questions we got about how to submit a bid. So within every case or property details page, there's the submit an offer, and then it will guide you to, who you are, right? There is no option for an individual to put a bid in here. I just don't think that's the case. I've never known anybody to do that independently. So I can certainly double check that, and if I'm wrong, I'll definitely let everyone know. But for now,
you are right. I already know the answer. I was just picking your brain.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, on HUD, you have to be represented by a broker if you're an investor. And so some of these investors don't want to deal with an agent, and that's just like too bad, luck of the draw. Like if you want to place an offer on one of these properties, you have to deal with a broker. That's all there is to it. Now, if you are like when Miles clicked that drop down menu, if you are a nonprofit business or a government agency, then you are permitted to place an offer on your own, but you have to be a registered user and bidder on the HUD Home Store site. So you'd have to go on and register first. Now, you guys as agents, I would highly recommend, if you have any intention of buying one of these properties or putting an offer in on one of these properties, go to hudhomestore.com and click on register or click on login and register as a bidder and get that done ahead of time, because it can take hours and sometimes days, because you got to get information, you got to bring it back, you got to upload it. It can take a while to get registered. So if you're going to be working with a buyer and they want to submit an offer real quick, and you're not registered on this site, like you don't want to tell your buyer, I'm sorry, wait 3 days to submit your offer. So get registered on here now. So when the time comes, you don't have to, take the time to do that.
Yeah, the other thing you want to know in advance is what your broker's NAID number is. I get tons of calls, people last minute wanting to submit a bid, and they have no idea, and then they got to either get their office manager or broker of record is who would house that or who would know that. So
yeah, and you will need that to register as an agent. So if Miranda, if you want to give us our NAID number in the chat box, that might be a good idea right now.
Yeah, and that's it. If you're with Pittsburgh East, that's it.
So Miles is walking through the bid submission a little bit here so you can see what it looks like.
Okay. So first thing, obviously, this would be the offer price, financing type. And then I don't know if this specifically was asked, but as far as closing costs, what does HUD do? There is an option in here to request assistance with closing costs. For owner occupants, they will. For investors, they have to pay all closing costs. And for either buyer type, all municipal requirements are on the buyer, either whether that's a homeowner or an investor. Once you put a price in here, let's just say we're going to do, it'll auto-populate what commission they're willing to pay. For HUD particularly, their commission is a 3%, 6% total, 3% to each side, unless it's under $33,000, and then it's just a flat $1,000 commission. So I bet if we increase this maybe to 45, it still shows 1,000. Yeah, it should be anything over 33,000. Should be a 3% commission.
Yeah, and you can put whatever you want in there, but they're probably just going to reject it. And quick question for you, Miles: what's going to be the best financing type? If I'm submitting an offer and I really want my offer to be accepted by HUD, what's the best financing solution?
So for HUD, it actually is almost irrelevant. What they consider is the net dollar to them. What are they going to walk away with? I've seen them accept finance offers on properties that were questionably going to even be able to be, financed even conventionally, over a lower, even closer cash offer. In my experience, they're just looking at the net dollar to them.
Okay. Now, if you were representing a buyer who was looking at, let's say, that first property that I pulled up that was on that large chunk of land and had boarded up windows and mold growing in it, if you're representing a buyer and your buyer wants to submit an offer on that property with FHA financing, what are you going to tell them?
Well, it's not going to fly, and specifically with HUD's process and their expectation of us. I mean, one of the things that they ask, or when I'm doing my initial, inspection, is what kind of financing is available for this, right? And I'll say, this is 203K only, or not available for FHA or conventional. So they're going to know ahead of time that, at least. But it actually might even be for this one. Yeah, you can't even select FHA certain types here. They're grayed out, and that's probably the reason why. You see how you can only select 203K, cash, or conventional, or other financing not involving HUD or FHA. So
good.
This question, if there are multiple offers received, they will hold backup offers. And if for some reason the offer they accept initially falls through and they're holding a backup offer, they won't make it active again. They'll just kind of default and go right back to the selling agent for who has that backup offer in, and give an opportunity to be followed through on.
Yep, and I have won bids for my buyers by being the backup also. So don't, if they got multiple offers and you think there's no shot, just submit the offer anyway.
Definitely. I'm not sure what they're looking for with these questions. I've never had anybody actually answer yes, as far as if any family members are associated or work for HUD and or selling broker. I guess the significance suggests that maybe if that's the case, they'll consider a conflict of some sort. And then purchaser information, for whatever reason, they ask for a social security number for individual buyers, which is unusual, but it is a required field and must be put in. And then if it's an investor, there is an option to click not living to establish that they're not living in the property. And you can add, if you click here, you can add if there's people taking ownership jointly. And the last thing is the settlement company. I've had people or agents submit bids and chosen, attorneys, maybe, someone who doesn't have an established relationship with HUD. Even the title attorney, not just the brokerage, has to have an account with HUD to be able to, perform the title and hold the closing. A lot of the bigger ones, like their information actually populates. I use PA Land Titles a lot, so I know they're in here. I think PB's probably in here too. But so it might even, if I selected that, it'll actually auto-populate their information, so it makes it easier. But just keep that in mind if you guys use companies that may not, like individual attorneys. A lot of times they don't have these relationships. It's going to be part of your closing package or checklist that you're going to have to do to get their E&O, to get their credentials over for them to establish a relationship with HUD before you're going to be able to actually put it under contract.
Yeah.
Any questions on that portion? That's probably that's my number one FAQ and number one question that I get. I even have agents draw up traditional sales agreements and send them to me directly rather than do this because they just don't know. But is there any questions about that?
Well, let's
Hey,
run
Miles,
through.
sorry about that.
Go ahead, Jason.
Miles, I had a quick question. I had to run out of the office real quick. You said that all closing costs are paid for by the buyer, correct?
What I said, so HUD will pay and contribute towards closing costs and even offer some assist. Let me backtrack here. Or no, yeah, right. If the buyer is an owner occupant, if it's an investor,
Okay.
they're not paying any closing costs.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yep.
And I'm going to run through a lot of the questions we had at the beginning because now's the best time to ask them, honestly. So,
Sure.
Miles, are there any income restrictions that you can't make over a certain amount to submit an offer as an owner occupant?
No, not for HUD's purposes that I've ever seen. I think a lot of those come from lenders who might be offering programs when people are applying for financing, but not from putting a bid in here.
Okay. So we already talked about possible road bumps if you're bringing an FHA offer on a beat up property. Any other mortgage or complications that you've run into along the path of trying to get one of these properties closed that is kind of like a reoccurring theme?
Yeah, the biggest one is with the utilities being off. The vast majority of these properties that I've seen actually fail a pressure test. The plumbing is usually the biggest one that keeps it from closing if someone's trying to get financing to purchase. And the reason being is also that HUD does not allow any repairs to happen prior to closing, and a lot of times they don't allow any escrows either, which usually presents the biggest challenge.
Okay. Yeah, and that's the one of the things that I run into also representing buyers is you'll get these buyers that want to do inspections and all of the utilities are shut off, and the bank or the seller doesn't want to turn utilities on, and so you're in this catch-22 type scenario where they some of them will actually say we will not turn the utilities on and you are not to turn the utilities on. And then the buyer has to make a decision of, do you want to actually do a full inspection or do you want to do a partial inspection and just buy the property as is? And I've had buyers that would actually have the utilities turned on temporarily during an inspection period in order for them to go test everything out. And they had to fund it themselves and set it up themselves. And, the seller had nothing to do with it.
Yeah, no. So HUD will 100% allow you to turn on utilities for an inspection, especially with a homeowner. They do give I think one of the other questions, what do they offer? Can someone back out because of inspections? They in their standard sales agreement for an owner occupant, there's a 15-day inspection window.
Yeah.
And so they give you you have to request permission from the field service manager. They give you a 72-hour window to do that. It's a clear-cut process, and the biggest thing is with this, just like this says, pressure tests fail. I mean, the majority of these do, and when you're trying to get an FHA loan, you got to demonstrate that not just that the utilities are on, but they're functional.
Insane.
So, yeah, having the water. I mean, I've seen conventionals go through where they've been able to just turn the water on at the meter and just not dewinterize the place. But that's definitely the number one challenge is with the plumbing.
Okay. And then what are the time frames that HUD would like to see as far as if you're putting a closing date on an offer? Do they care what the closing date is?
Well, they don't even give, the selling agent, or the buyer an opportunity to choose that. Their default timeframes are, if it's cash financing, you get 30 days. If it's conventional, if it's a cash deal, it's 30 days. If it's conventional financing, it's 45 days. If it's FHA, it's 60 days.
Okay. So there's pretty much guidelines there. And, the funny thing is that HUD and any other corporate owners or sellers typically will be very strict about the deadline for you or for the buyer. But then when it comes to their deadlines, they're loosey-goosey, right?
I just had a deal sit under contract for 12 months while HUD cleared up an inheritance tax issue. Okay. And so early December, that gets cleared. Now this buyer, I mean, this same buyer did extension after extension. I mean, they didn't charge him because it wasn't the buyer's fault. Early December, that gets cleared. The title company reorders everything. They gave him a 15-day extension, and they tried to charge him to extend again because they didn't have, Jordan didn't have the tax search back in time. It was like, I mean, we're like, we just waited for a year for you.
Yeah.
And it's like they're tough.
Yeah, and they're not logical a lot of times.
So
So yeah, so if you're going to bring an offer and it says cash close in 30 days, you better be ready to close in 30 days because they're going to usually charge you like $100 a day for any sort of delay.
yeah.
But what you'll find a lot of times, especially if we end up in a market where we've got a lot of these going on, when the banks get overloaded with this stuff, then they start getting really sloppy. Like they're already sloppy to begin with, but when they get overloaded with these things, they get really sloppy. So back in 2009, 10, and 11, when I was putting these deals under contract, none of them closed on time. None of them. We had buyers that were ready to go in 2 weeks, and the banks had liens on properties that they still haven't cleaned up. There were banks that were putting properties on the market that they didn't even own yet. Like they did not finish the foreclosure process yet. So we had the property sold and ready to close, but the bank didn't even have title. So you guys got to be prepared for that, especially if we start getting into a market where there's a lot of foreclosures, is that, do not expect these to close on time on the bank side of things, but you always got to make sure that your buyer is ready to close on time because they will get charged if they're not.
Yeah, generally, with HUD, they do a good job of having title clear prior to their listing. That was only one time, and I've sold probably, at least 30 of their listings, and that was the only time there was any issue.
Okay. So let me see here. I'm trying to get the.
I think another one was the steps, right? So when we get the assignment from that to listing was another one. I think Kelsey sent that over, which is a good question. So the first assignment that I get whenever it's to do the initial property inspection report, and then I'm getting in there after the inspector has went in, prepared a report, and turned the utilities off and winterized the place. So they send me. I'm still screen sharing, right?
No, I took the. You're not on screen share anymore.
Oh, okay. I was going to show an example of one, but so I look at that, and then they ask me to go out and do my own walkthrough, take some pictures, and pretty much just kind of comb over what was done and just make sure that everything is correct and everything still looks good and it's in a position to be shown. So that's the first thing I do, and then the next assignment is to prepare a broker price opinion, and they have their own standard format. It's a trimmed down appraisal form to a degree, and they want me to show competitive comps that have sold, comps that are active, and a few other things. But I come up with my price opinion, and they also do an appraisal. And really, in my experience, they go with what the appraiser says, probably as they should. But those are steps 1 and 2. Now, once the appraisal is in, they send me back out to take listing photos and submit them to them. And then after that, they list it on HUD Home Store. And as they do that, they send it to us and say, we're good to put it on the MLS.
Are there any times where you do all that and then they just don't list the property with you?
No, they've never not listed it with me, but there have been some times, I had one out in Jeanette one time that had an active roof leak. So I went out there, I did my report, I showed that. They asked me to send them any pictures of damages that I note that may not have been noted in the inspection report. For whatever reason, that got overlooked. When they saw that, they they're not going to list it with an actively, roof leak. So they wanted those repairs to happen first, and then once that happens, they send me back out to confirm that everything's good and are ready to show condition. So, I mean, that one took probably, a month and a half to get, which was unusually long. Their process is usually 3 to 4 weeks from when I get the assignment to when it's on the market. It's pretty streamlined. But no, they've never taken a listing from me, thankfully.
Okay. And then how long do they give you? Like when they say, hey, we need pictures, how long do you have to get the pictures into them?
So those assignments are usually 24 hours. The BPOs, and sometimes they actually ask me to get copies of tax bills, like if to find out if there's anything owed that they might have been overlooked when their attorneys presumably ran title. But those are like 3-4 day tasks. But most of these are 24 hours.
Okay. And I think the last question we haven't hit yet was, do a lot of agents deal with REO properties? I would say no. Miles, what do you think? I think it's probably like a small portion.
Yeah, I think the perspective, at least the, people that I've talked to a lot of times just, recognize that they're a little more labor intensive, and people try to stay away from them. Lower volume deals, lower commission deals, more labor intensive, which is fair. I mean, there's to a degree that's certainly accurate.
Yeah. And I can tell you on the buyer side, one of the things that I didn't realize when I first started dealing with foreclosures was that if I just accept whatever commission, HUD or these sellers is offering, I'm not going to make any money. Like I sat down and I calculated the one time and I'm like, holy crap, I could just go work at McDonald's and make more money than this. So you as a buyer's agent, if you're going to represent somebody that's putting offers in on properties like this, you need to figure out what you need to make in order for it to be worthwhile for you. So I can't tell you what you need to charge. Well, I can tell our agents what my team should be charging for a minimum commission, and you guys already know that. But if you're an agent that's working on your own, you're running your own business, you need to decide what your minimum commission is going to be and then stick with that. So when I was just dealing with these deals on my own and just taking whatever was being offered, I sold 38 properties and I made less than poverty level income. Okay. Think about that. That's nuts. 38 deals and I was in the poverty level. I looked at that at the end of the year when I was submitting my taxes and I thought, this cannot happen again. I am going to start charging a minimum commission. And when I did, my income doubled. Okay. I ended up going from like 30-some thousand to over 60,000 the next year. And I closed 38 deals the next year. Same number of deals, but I doubled my money. Okay. So, take it from an experienced agent. You need to charge a commission that makes sense because these are not easy deals to get closed. They are not easy deals to get submitted offer-wise. However, if you get good at it and you're working with people who are willing to pay you that commission that you want, then these are surefire deals for the most part. If you've got a cash buyer and they're submitting an offer and it gets accepted, it is going to close. And it is going to close usually in 30 to 45 days, like clockwork. So this can be a really good source of consistent income and contacts. A lot of the contacts that I made when I was selling these crappy foreclosure deals that nobody wanted to deal with, they are still contacts that bring me listings and buy bigger properties. And I'll give you 2 examples. Well, the first one was the guy that bought that Mount Washington deal. He paid $13,000 for it, and I made like a $2,000 commission on that deal. He brought back to me this property to list for 113. We sold it for 113. I'm going to make something like a little bit over $3,000 on that, but I've sold him other deals along the way. I've sold other properties for him along the way. He's referred his brother and sister to buy a property from us last year for like $350,000, $375,000. So the business that I got out of the relationship that I had with him buying crappy properties real cheap has turned into hundreds of thousands of dollars in income. And then I have another buyer client from back in, this is probably 2010 that I sold him a foreclosure. He called me last week and said, hey, we're ready to sell our portfolio. I have 13 listings for you. I'm going to get 13 listings from one client. How many of you got 13 listings in a month before? I can't see any of you, but I'm assuming that there's not many of you raising a hand right now. Working with investors can be very beneficial over the long haul. It's not a quick and easy way to make money though, right? So working these deals, these foreclosure and REO deals is not quick money, but it is a good way to form long-term relationships because a lot of agents don't want to do it.